Honestly, I'm surprised that I didn't talk about this sooner. And it's so weird to me too, because when people ask me about JSX, I'm like, oh yeah, I was first officer there. I flew airplanes and all that stuff. But there was so much more to my experience at JSX that I never talked about on this channel. And I was thinking to myself the other day, I was like, I'd never talked about these various experiences that I've had at JSX that have really helped me out or just made my career interesting and given me cool stories. So I figured I'd make this video today to kind of talk about that. At no point am I trashing JSX or anybody who I flew with during the time. I flew with great people. It was a good company. These are just my stories, and I'm here to share them with you. So let's get into it. The first interesting thing that involved me at JSX was the fact that I didn't just fly, as I said earlier. There was a lot more that I did at JSX besides just fly. And one of the big things that I did, I was in charge of scheduling. Now, when I say scheduling, I'm not talking about aircraft dispatchers and all that stuff. What I was in charge of was, at first I was working on flight attendant schedules, and that was not fun. But essentially at JSX, we bid days on and days off for the month. And then after that bid was complete and the flight attendants and pilots knew their days on and days off, I would go into the system and manually assign their flights. And then once those got published, the flight attendants and pilots respectively had the opportunity to email or call us and say, hey, I want to swap out this day for this day, or I want to give this trip to this person, and then they'll take my trip and give me this, and I'll take their trip. And it was complicated. So what happened was I ended up working my way over into doing the first officer schedules. And that was probably the easiest schedule to do, because the first officers, especially at a company like JSX, where your next goal is something bigger, you're trying not to make any waves. Your requests are small and they're usually reasonable. And so doing the first officer schedules was easy and I loved doing it. But I had a dilemma in the sense that I did not want people to think that I was getting a preferable schedule because I was making my own schedule, right? Because I'm a first officer making first officer schedules, there could be a problem there. So I decided to move over and do captains. A guy came in later on who was working on flight attendant schedules. He moved up to first officers, and then we brought on one more guy in our group to work the flight attendant schedules. Now, no, we're all pilots, so we're also flying full time, and then we also have the ability to we also have the responsibility of doing schedules. Now, this would be pretty clutch sometimes, because there would be times where there's like havoc at the airline, or the schedule falls apart, or a bunch of people calling sick, or some kind of natural disaster. All kinds of stuff would happen. And this would mean that we would basically get like a work at home day. So we're supposed to go to work on a Thursday, but then Wednesday night we get a call and they say, hey guys, like we need you on the schedule tomorrow. Can you guys do it? And we're like, oh yeah, but we're supposed to work tomorrow. They're like, cool, don't worry about it. It'll be covered. Let me tell you, fantastic. I loved it. It was the best thing in the world. We'd be like, oh, dude, we're not working anymore. We just be at home on our schedule, just doing schedule stuff. You know what I mean? It was cool seeing the back door of how an airline works. And not only did I handle captain schedules, I also did airplane schedules. So I would schedule a specific airplane to do certain routes. And, this was the one part where maybe I did get a little bit biased, because, every pilot at an airline, at least I think, they start to build their favorite aircraft, at least at JSS, because it was so small. And I knew what my favorite aircraft were, and I was based in Phoenix at the time. So I would try to make sure that the airplanes that I had a preference for stayed in the Phoenix area, because I really liked those airplanes. But that was it. And it was nothing crazy. It wasn't like I was causing any harm to any of the other bases or anything like that, or impacting the reliability of the airline. You have your favorite planes, and I like to have those planes around, or maybe one plane that just got a really cool paint job I hadn't seen yet, but oh yeah, let me schedule it to come through Phoenix for the next couple of days, and hopefully I get to fly it. And even when I would do that, there wasn't a guarantee that that schedule would remain true, because we would do it far enough out in advance. But then also when that day actually came, the airplane might break down, the crews might call in sick, the weather might get in the way, and then that plane is God knows where. So there were so many things that went into the schedule that you could never really ever have anything perfect. When you get to see behind the curtain like that, you start to really understand, the operation of the company that you work for. And for me, it was very eye-opening in the sense that things that I would complain about when I was just a pilot, some of it, not all of it, some of it made more sense now, because I could see into the background, and I was the person who was doing this and who was doing that. And so when people would complain about the schedules, it was interesting to be able to explain to them that there's actually a very specific reason why we did it that way. Let me tell you why. And usually when I did that, people would be like, oh, that makes sense actually. Or sometimes they would still be mad, but I mean, you can't please everybody. The other one that I did, and I wouldn't say it was really a job, but it was more of a volunteer position that I had. I didn't get paid for this. It was when I was on the Jumpseat committee. And for those of you who don't know, the jumpseating is when pilots commute between where they live and where they work. So for example, when I was at JSX for the longest time, we didn't have a base besides Burbank. It was just Burbank base. So I would commute from Phoenix to Burbank. Well, the problem was that JSX, and at the time it was called JetSuite X, this is important. At the time it was called JetSuite X. They weren't that big. And so commuting was difficult because we didn't have a lot of agreements with a lot of airlines. So oftentimes, or at least at the time, my only choice to get from Phoenix to Burbank was just Southwest. And if Southwest was full, I'd have to drive, right? And at the time, we only had a non-ref agreement. So that meant that I had to have a seat in the cabin. Even if the jump seat itself, which is that extra seat in the cockpit, even if that was open, I still could not ride it because we didn't have a contract. And so that led me to reach out to the guy who was in charge of the Jumpseat committee at JSX. And I was like, hey man, can I join the team and try to get us some contracts? And originally he was like, nah, man, I think I got it. It's just, it takes time. But if an opportunity ever comes up, I'll let you know. Well, sure enough, opportunity came up. A couple of months later, he gives me a call. He's like, are you still interested in the position? And I'm like, yeah. Like, if you want me on board, man, I'm here to help. He's like, cool. He said, I want to go on a cruise. So I'm going to send you to Washington, D.C., and you're going to go to the National Jumpseat Committee, and you're going to talk to a bunch of Jumpseat guys and see what you can do. Just have fun. Company pays for everything. Have a good old time. I said, sign me up, bro. So it was in Washington, D.C. I go down there. And so I'm talking to all these guys. I'm talking with guys from Hawaiian Airlines, from FedEx, from UPS, just any airline that I could find. I'm talking to them. I'm like, hey, we're new here. We're JetSuite X, not JetSuite. Now, this is important. A lot of people thought that we were JetSuite. JetSuite only flies Phenom 100s and 300s, and maybe at the time they're still flying some CJ3s, but I can't remember. But they were all small jets that were just doing purely charter operations. And when it comes to solidifying a jumpsuit agreement, it needs to be reciprocal. An airline's pilots need to be able to say, okay, I can go on JSX at 1:30 p.m. I can see the schedule online and that there is a jumpsuit available for me and that it isn't a charter flight. Anybody can hop on it, right? The issue was that a lot of people thought we were JetSuite and not JetSuite X. And so they would say, hey man, like this is really interesting, but unfortunately we can't do anything with you because you guys only have Phenom 100s and 300s and no jump seat and you're not on the schedule. So how are our guys going to use you guys? And so that was a lot of the work, was explaining, no, JetSuite's totally different. We're JetSuite X, and then later on became JSX. And we do have schedules and we do have a jump seat. We fly the 145 and the 135. We have 30 seats on our airplane. Our airplanes are more comfortable. It was very rare to be completely full on a JSX airplane. So I'm like, the odds of your guys, as in your pilots, missing a flight or having a miscommute is slim to none to take us, because there's usually at least one seat available. And if for some reason the cabin is completely full, the jump seat was open by 99% of the time. So it was almost a guaranteed ticket to work, which is a lot better than what I could say with other airlines, because with other airlines, it's not uncommon for the jump seat to be taken or for the flight to be completely full, and then you're kind of stuck wondering how you're gonna get to work. So that was a really great advantage for guys to use us. But more importantly, for those of us who were commuting, it was really essential that we got these contracts with airlines like American, Southwest, and Hawaiian to really help us out, because we were a West Coast company. This kind of stuff took years. I mean, when I was at the Jumpseat meeting there in Washington, D.C., I was able to secure a tentative agreement, I should say, with FedEx, and that went great, and they were an excellent company to work with. But two companies that really would have done us solid, like I said earlier, was American and Southwest, and those are the two companies that took the longest for me to get. And when I say long, I mean 2-3 years easy. To give some context, to get the contract at American Airlines, our jumpseat agreement and all the verbiage had to be ran by the lawyers, and then it had to be ran up to middle management. Middle management had to approve it. After middle management approved it, it had to be ran up to the CEO. The CEO had to read it and sign it, and then send it back down the chain. And then finally it got to us. And by the time it got back to me and they were like, yeah, we'll get you guys going, it was, oh gosh, it had to be 3 or 4 years that this took. And with every other jumpseat agreement that I had secured, it was always really cool because I got to sign my name on it. But American was the only company, I believe, where I wasn't able to sign my name. And instead they wanted the director of operation to sign the contract instead. So he signed it. But I mean, I got contracts set up with Breeze, Avelo, Southwest, American, We were working on United and Delta, but by the time I left, they weren't secured yet. And a couple of other smaller cargo carriers, so we had Spirit, Allegiant, stuff like that. And those were all really good. And for me, that was really fulfilling in the sense that when I left, I knew I was leaving a legacy, that the pilots who came after me were going to benefit from the work that I was able to do for them. And also it was able to benefit me as well, because for a lot of the time that I was at JSX, I was commuting, and JSX is notoriously not favorable for commuters, at least when I was there, because you really didn't overnight much. You pretty much, if you were based in Phoenix, you would leave that day, you would fly around the West Coast, and you would come back home the same day. So if you were a commuter who didn't live in base, that meant that you were getting hotels or staying at a crash pad every single night that you were on duty. And so that's not exactly ideal for commuters. And you had to add on the issue of not having any contracts. It made it very difficult to commute at JSX. So I was really happy to be able to kind of influence that and change that and help out our pilot group. And the last story that I want to get to is when I was at JSX, one of the other duties that I had as a first officer was I was one of the guys who were primarily in charge, and I say guys, first officers, who got assigned to do maintenance and ferry flights and delivery flights. These were the flights where I learned the most about the 145, because we would go pick up these planes that we just ordered, and we would order, I shouldn't say order, that we bought. And these planes would be bought from scrapyards, basically, airplane scrapyards, airplane graveyards. And so we would buy these airplanes, and then these graveyards have mechanics on site. So the mechanics would pull these airplanes in, and they would basically put them in together and get them running, just to the point that we could get a special flight permit, which is basically a permission from the FAA to fly an airplane that would otherwise be unworthy to a spot that will allow us to get maintenance on it, right? And I mean, this was interesting because the goal here really was just to get the airplane to a mechanical state in which it could fly safely to the next place to get repaired. And so we would see all kinds of issues and nuances and weird things that you would never see on the line, because those maintenance items would never, ever be on an airplane that is flying passengers ever, And so it's really interesting because you would learn a lot about the airplane. I mean, I learned so much about the 145 and the 135 just because of all the maintenance flights that I did. There was one there's one story that actually cracks me up a little bit. Is we had a spot down in Mexico, Querétaro. I'm probably not saying it right, but they have a huge maintenance facility down there, and a lot of big airlines work with them, including Delta. But we would send our planes down there sometimes to get refurbished. So we would buy these planes, and we would buy them like in Kingman, Arizona, take off out of Kingman or wherever we bought them from, and take them on down to Mexico. Well, one day they call us up and they say, hey, one of your planes is ready. You guys come pick it up whenever you're ready. We say, okay, cool. So we booked the tickets. For none of us, it was not a direct flight for anybody, right? So we'd have to take off, or we have to fly from one airport, connect someplace else, and then fly on down to Mexico. So it was kind of a trek. It was like a half a day-ish to get there. And so we get there early in the morning as we could. And we're like, hey guys, we're ready to go. Just give us the keys to the plane. We'll be on the way. And they're like, oh, yeah. You know what? Just give us an hour. Give us an hour to finish up some stuff, and you guys are ready to go. We said, cool. All right, no worries. So we wait around for an hour. Wait. And we're like, hey, guys, is the plane ready yet? Like, no. Give us until lunchtime. And at lunchtime, it'll be good to go. We're like, okay, cool. All right, no worries. And so lunchtime comes around. And I'm like, hey guys, are we good to go? Can we finally leave now? And they're like, no. The guys just left for lunch. So go ahead, wait till 3, and then when 3 o'clock comes, you guys will be ready. At this point, the guy who I'm flying with, he's pissed, the captain. He was like, we've been waiting too long. Let me go to the plane. And they're like, no, we can't show you the plane. By the time you said, no, we can't show you the plane, he's already walking to the plane. So we're going to go see the plane. I'm just looking, and I'm like, this is insane. Because I'm a chill guy, I don't really care. I'd rather be home, but I really don't care. So we're walking to the plane, and as we're getting closer, I'm just shaking my head because I'm thinking to myself, I have no idea why you guys called us. We get to the plane, we walk on board. The interior is completely torn apart, right? The plane was advertised to be ready to go. Interior installed, no issues, everything fixed, ready to get to Burbank and fly the line. That was not the case at all. And when an interior is as torn apart as this one was because they were rebuilding it, that is not a it'll be done in an hour project. That's a it'll be done in a week or two project. And so the guy who I was flying with was hot. And he had some things to say to everybody who was in charge of that operation because it was ridiculous. We weren't necessarily mad that the plane wasn't ready. We were mad that you wasted our time and money to bring us down here and then all day told us the plane be ready when it wouldn't. It was very obvious that that airplane, there was no way that airplane is going to be ready within that day. There's no possible way. And so that was an interesting experience. A lot of people got chewed out, rightfully so. And thank the Lord, by the time we figured all this out, we had about an hour to make the last flight out back to the States. So after they got their ear chewed off, we hopped on a United Airlines flight, ran through security. They helped us out because most of the guys knew us there by then because we were in and out of there so much. They ran us out. We got on a plane, then we headed back to Houston. And then maybe about a week or two later, we came back in and got that plane. But, situations like that were so interesting. And like I said earlier, there were so many mechanical issues that we would run into doing these flights where you really learned the airplane or you were really taking your flying abilities to the absolute limit because it was just the nature of the operation. You had to do what you had to do. And it was fun too because you kind of felt like a cowboy. The company let you do what you had to do to get the job done, and that was great. Whatever you need to spend, you could spend it. Wherever you need to go, you could go. I mean, I have so many stories about this. So if you guys want to hear more kind of those mechanic stories and picking up planes in Mexico and Miami and jumping around the country during COVID, let me know because I have so many of those. And if you guys like it and if this video does well, I'll make a part 2.